Spectrovision Radio.
I always sat in the same booth. Never once had I arrived to find my spot occupied by someone else. Only a few others frequented the place, littering its stools in the twilight hours, and none of them ever took an interest in sitting on my patch of torn leather at the back of the dark room. It was where down-and-outs who managed to scrape enough together for a watery beer or stale sandwich came to pass the hours, and if only for a short while, quench their thirst and fill their stomachs. A far cry away from the world of privilege I usually inhabited. So why did I keep going there? The truth is, I didn't know the answer to that question. I found myself inexplicably drawn to it. I always made sure it was obvious that I was not talking to myself. I did this by holding the dictaphone almost directly in front of my face. If any of the dreary souls sat at the counter did bother to crane their necks and look my way, lazily intrigued by the persistent murmuring coming from the back of the room, they soon realized I was not worth the attention. I can't say quite why I felt it necessary to record my musings on that place, which were in truth almost identical from week to week. But I had become intrigued with that strange little locale in a way I couldn't justify. It wasn't an obsession, and I never felt the need to up the frequency of my visits. But I had a desire to understand it in a way I could feel, but couldn't articulate. I routinely listened back to the cassettes of my recordings whilst at home or even while walking through the more luxurious surroundings of my usual habitat. I would smile without quite knowing why, chuckle without the faintest notion of having heard a joke, and even shed the occasional tear, all as if listening to a great speech which compressed the spectrum of human emotion into a single passage. One night, as I sat in the same booth, a man slightly worse for wear was making a fuss over his bill at the counter. I could make out only the disgruntled nature of his protests, as he waved his arms frantically at the bartender, who looked as if she were about to fall asleep. Realizing she wasn't interested in negotiating, the man eventually tugged an old wallet from his back pocket. As he did so, a silver coin was launched from its faux leather confinement and began speeding across the floor towards me. I felt it hit the side of my shoe and come to a stop. Ducking my head to retrieve it, I noticed something had been taped to the underside of the table. It was a large white envelope, secured to the wood with numerous layers of tape. Not wanting to alert anyone to this odd discovery, I picked up the wayward coin and handed it back to the scruffy man, who was hovering over me with an outstretched hand. He didn't thank me and turned away as soon as the piece had touched his skin. I waited until I was quite sure everyone had gone back to their usual practice of paying me no attention whatsoever, before quietly peeling away the tape and opening the envelope in my lap. I ripped off the top of one side and peeked into the opening. Inside was a single cassette. I fumbled it into my pocket and made my way to the exit as quickly as I could. Pressing my headphones into the small socket, I listened to the cassette as I made my way home. As soon as the first words were spoken, any questions over whether it had been left for me were completely dispelled. Stranger still, although I was sure the voice was not my own, the similarities were undeniable. The phrasing and delivery reminded me of the experience of listening to one of my own recordings. I have been pondering whether to contact you for some time now. Only on a handful of occasions have I begun to be convinced that my replacement has arrived. And every time, I have been mistaken. However, you are quite different, and I am absolutely certain my judgment is not in error. You are most definitely the one. Your fascination with this place might be quite inexplicable to you, and the means by which you stumbled across it will surely appear completely random. But I assure you nothing could be further from the truth. It was quite simply your destiny to end up here, directed by enigmatic and undetectable cosmic messages to follow a path that would lead you to me, to this place. For so long I wished for you to come, to relieve me of this incredible burden. But now that you're here, I am contacting you only to warn you away, to sacrifice the last remaining bit of myself, in order to prevent you from being consumed by this torturous fate. This place has had many faces, and the one you see before you is just the latest in a sequence of unimportant decoys. What is truly of importance lies beneath it. In the basement there is an obscured doorway which leads into a cave-like system of tunnels. At the epicenter of this labyrinthine mess is a circular chamber, in the middle of which is an ancient well. The well is the reason this place, and the many decoys before it, exist. The reason that I, and I fear you, are drawn to it is just a tiny glimpse of its trickery. I was summoned, just as you have been, to act as its sole guardian. The well is deep and exceedingly dark, but what is clear is that it houses some viscous black liquid, unlike anything I have encountered in the world you are accustomed to seeing around you. Thicker than honey, and blacker than the most desolate starless night, it swishes with an inexplicable current, churning in the well, rising and falling from the depths of the earth, as if powered by some deep, ancient tide. Should anyone who was not summoned ever come into contact with the well and its forbidden contents, it would be the end of the fallacy people call life, and the true perverseness of this cold, uncaring universe would be revealed. You see, this liquid, if that is indeed what one should call it, is the anti-meaning of life, which ironically is the true meaning of things. And it is not content to simply stay put if left to its own devices. Every second the Guardian spends away from this place, the tide rises. It rises until the black liquid begins to seep over the lip of the well. If left alone, a parade of perplexing, grotesque creatures begin to form, moulding themselves out of that fluid, out of the ink of nightmares. They set off in a wobbling lurch, disfigured, malignant masses, slowly moving in the direction of our world. When the Guardian returns, they begin to retreat, undoing themselves until they are once again the black oil, which recedes back into the well and back down to rejoin the throbbing tide. If that substance, or the creatures it shapes itself into, ever came into contact with the outside world, the reasons we give ourselves to live would entirely disintegrate. Religion, science, love, even supposed apathy, would be rendered completely preposterous under this new, terrifying clarity. To put it simply, nothing would mean anything, in the most frightening and destructive of ways. My advice to you, my friend, if I may call you that, is to run as far away from here as you possibly can. Fight every last urge you have to return and abscond yourself in some remote and forgotten part of this planet. For if you do not, I can assure you, there is no escape to be had later. I battled myself at the hands of this dark knowledge, not to just let you come and relieve me of my duties. It seems there is still something left within me, capable of repelling the meaninglessness. Somehow, I was still able to ascertain that in some way you do matter. In the way I once did. And that taking that from you would signify my complete absorption into the unforgiving black nothing promised at the bottom of that well. The voice stopped there. Unfortunately, as you will have already guessed by listening to this, my efforts to distance myself from this damned place were futile. After a brief spell of running, I succumbed to the inevitable and headed back into that dingy dive bar. I asked the bartender if I could see the owner, and she disappeared through the door behind the counter and came back with an old and extraordinarily tired-looking man. As he looked up at me from his hunched position, I saw a glint of disappointment flash in his eyes for a brief moment. He then seemed to compose himself and limped over towards the till. He opened it and retrieved a set of keys, which he handed to me. He tapped the bartender on the shoulder and raised a stubby, curled finger towards me. She nodded in silent understanding, and with that he struggled into a coat and hat which he produced from underneath the bar and vacated the building without a word spoken. All that was so long ago now, that much of it is probably subject to my memory distorting and jumbling it into less than accurate renditions of the perfect truth. The only thing that I ask you take to heart is the plea the old man made to me, the one I am now making to you. I have watched you sit there, in the same spot I did, scribbling away in your notebooks for some time now. Despite what those writings might say, let me assure you that there is nothing in this place for you, but nothingness itself. You have been chosen by forces unseen to be its next guardian. Resist its call at all costs. Let us conspire to end our lineage here. Let me be the last. Let me guard it eternally, and spare another poor soul the curse of keeping its horrible secret.